Welcome to e-commerce psychology, the deep dive that takes all your learning to the next level.
Absolutely.
This time, we're looking at a really interesting concept that you've probably come across, even if you didn't know it had a name.
Right.
It's the mere exposure effect.
Yeah.
You sent us this great article from e-commerce psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Leveraging the Mere Exposure Effect for Brand Recognition. And we're going to dig into exactly how this works, what's going on in the mind of your customer, and crucially, how you can use it strategically to help your e-commerce business thrive. Like, think about that brand logo that just feels right.
Yes.
Or that product that keeps showing up in your feed.
Yeah.
That's the power we're going to unpack. This podcast is powered by Growth Suite.
Oh?
Growth Suite helps you to run smart discount campaigns on your store. Test it for free on your Shopify store. Just land on the Shopify App Store now and test it for free.
At its heart, the mere exposure effect, which was, really brought to light by psychologist Robert Zajon back in 1968.
Okay.
It's really all about this idea that we tend to like things more simply because we've been exposed to them repeatedly.
Oh, interesting.
So we're going to delve into the psychology behind this.
Okay.
Some of the mechanisms at play. And I think what's going to be really interesting for you is seeing how this seemingly simple principle, this idea of mere exposure,
Right.
can actually be a really powerful tool in your overall marketing approach.
Yeah.
So we'll be exploring that, and we'll also be looking at how that consistency, that repeated visibility can foster positive feelings and a sense of trust over time.
I like it. So for you, the learner listening in, the point of this deep dive is to give you a really solid grasp on why consistent brand messaging and visuals across all those touch points is so incredibly valuable.
Right.
We'll break down how this effect can help you spend your marketing dollars a little bit more efficiently, build up that foundation of brand recognition, and help you stand out, cut through all the noise, in a very, very busy online space.
It's a crowded space out there.
It is very crowded.
It is.
And we'll cover everything from like how to figure out that sweet spot, that frequency of exposure, to, seeing how the big players as well as small businesses are already doing this.
Absolutely.
Let's get started by defining this thing, laying the groundwork, so to speak.
Okay, so let's unpack this concept of the mere exposure effect.
Okay.
In the simplest terms.
Yeah.
It's this phenomenon where the more we see something, the more we hear something, the more familiar we are with a name,
Right.
The more likely we are to develop a positive feeling toward it.
Right. I mean, so like I'm thinking, you might hear a song on the radio and at first you're like, oh, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But then it grows on you.
Absolutely. That's a classic example.
Yeah. Or you see like a banner ad and it pops up all the time and you're like, I don't even know what this is, but now I kind of like it,
Yeah. Familiarity breeds preference.
It really does, yeah.
Yeah.
So this isn't just like anecdotal. You know what I mean? This is a thing.
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is where Zajon's work really comes in.
Okay.
It provided that scientific foundation for this.
Right.
He showed that repeated exposure alone,
Yeah.
without any other positive reinforcement,
Okay.
could increase liking.
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the takeaways here for somebody in e-commerce?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is, when potential customers are repeatedly seeing your brand,
Okay.
whether it's your logo, your colors, the tone of voice you use in your messaging,
Yeah.
they start to develop that ease, that preference,
Right.
often without consciously even thinking about it.
Right.
So that familiarity paves the way
It does.
for comfort,
Right.
and then that natural inclination towards your brand
Right.
when they're ready to make a purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes it less scary to buy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Reduces the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you see like the same logo all the time, same colors, same tagline, it just starts to feel safe.
Exactly. I mean, and the thing is, a lot of this is happening below the surface, right? It's subconscious. When we see something over and over again, our brains process it more fluently,
Right.
faster.
Right.
And that ease of processing, our brains kind of go, oh, well, this must be safe. This must not be a threat.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, things that were familiar generally weren't going to kill you.
Right. Exactly.
So there's this kind of ingrained...
You're not running from that thing anymore.
Exactly.
You've seen it 1,000 times.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, if you're a brand and you're showing up consistently with your with your visuals,
Got
with
it.
your message.
Right.
It could be tapping into that ancient part of the brain,
Yeah.
that sense of safety.
Right. Yeah, I'm okay with this.
Exactly.
This is fine.
Yeah.
So how does this affect a business?
Well, okay, so let's connect this back to strategy, right?
Yeah.
This isn't just about creating some vague good feeling.
Right.
There's a real solid business case
Okay.
for using this in your marketing.
Okay.
So for one, it massively increases brand recall,
Okay.
which, in the world of e-commerce, that's huge.
Yeah.
Simply being recognizable
Yeah.
is a massive advantage. If people have seen your brand multiple times, they're way more likely to remember you when they actually need what you sell.
Right. Oh, yeah, I've seen that before.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. And it goes beyond just remembering your name.
okay.
People tend to go for brands they know
Right.
over ones they've never seen before,
Right. Makes sense.
even if the products are very similar.
Yeah. Less risk.
Exactly. It's that trust factor.
I've seen this one. This one's safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reduces that risk.
I like it.
Yeah.
So practically speaking,
Yeah.
how does this affect like how much money you spend and things like that?
Well, focusing on this mere exposure effect
Hey.
can be super cost effective.
Okay.
So instead of needing to constantly come up with
Right.
brand new, crazy, complicated marketing campaigns,
Right.
you could just strategically focus on being consistent,
Okay.
with your messaging, your visuals, your branding.
Right. Right. Less reinventing the wheel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's about building that brand equity over time.
Okay.
Hmm.
I like it. So we've talked about psychology a little bit, but what's happening in the brain when this is all going on?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. When we see a brand a lot, it activates those neural pathways
Okay.
linked to memory and recognition.
Okay.
The article even talks about the amygdala,
Right.
which, as you probably know, is super important for processing emotions.
Right.
So every time we see that message and we have a positive feeling,
Right.
that feeling gets linked to the brand.
Right.
Over time, it builds up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're creating like a
That's like a shortcut.
shortcut. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I recognize this. Good feeling.
Exactly. And the more we see it, the faster those circuits fire,
Right.
leading to that stronger positive association.
Yeah. So the brain is like, oh, we've seen this. It's safe. We're good.
Exactly.
We're good.
Yeah.
But you can't just,
There's a catch, right?
you can't just spam people with it.
You can't just bombard people. There's this thing called the inverted U-shaped response curve.
Okay. Tell me more.
It's basically saying more isn't always better.
Right. 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 So the more I see it, the more I like it, but only to a point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Eventually, yes, more exposure equals more liking.
Right.
But there's a tipping point.
Right. Right. And then if you go past that,
You go too far, and it can backfire.
it can. Yeah.
Yeah, people get tired of it.
Right. Right.
Might even get annoyed.
Right. So how do you find that sweet spot?
It's about finding that optimal frequency.
Okay.
You want that sweet spot where it's familiar but not annoying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Right.
This is where we get into the idea of individual differences.
Okay.
The article talks about how different people react differently
Right.
to seeing the same message.
Right.
So, your target audience,
Yeah.
what's their demographic, what's their
Yeah.
personality,
What's their culture?
culture, huge.
Yeah.
All those things play a role.
So I guess you really have to know who you're talking to.
You really do. You have to understand your ideal customer.
Right. Because what works for one person might not work for another.
Absolutely. What might be reassuring for one person
Yeah.
might be super annoying for someone else.
Right. Or it might be okay in one culture, but then
Yeah, totally inappropriate.
in another is like, whoa, back off,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you put this into practice?
Okay, so let's get practical.
Okay.
Let's talk about some strategic implementation.
Okay. I like it.
Let's start with, frequency and timing.
Okay.
Obviously, it's not just about showing your brand everywhere all the time.
Right.
The article mentions this distinction between spaced repetition and massed exposure.
Okay. What are those? Break it down for me.
All right, so spaced repetition is basically
Yeah.
you're showing your ads or messages, at certain intervals,
Okay.
allowing time for people to
Yeah.
process it.
So it's like studying.
Mhm.
You don't just cram it all in at once.
Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
space it out, you let it sink in.
Okay.
Then you have massed exposure, which is basically
Yeah.
hitting them with a lot of messages in a short amount of time.
Okay.
And both can be useful.
Okay.
But the key takeaway is you have to test it out.
Okay.
See what works best for your product, for your audience.
Right. And you also have to think about timing, right?
Absolutely.
Like what day of the week is it? What time of day?
Yeah. When are people most likely to see it and engage with it?
Right. Because, if you're showing them an ad for coffee at like 10 o'clock at night, they might not be interested.
Exactly. You want to catch them when they're thinking about coffee.
Right. I need coffee now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, spreading it out a bit can help prevent that feeling of, oh, I'm sick of seeing this brand.
Right. Right. So what about visuals? How do visuals play into all this?
This is crucial.
Okay.
Visual identity.
Okay.
You want that consistent look.
Okay.
Makes your brand instantly recognizable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Colors, logos, typography,
Yeah.
those are your visual cues.
Right. Okay.
And the great thing about a strong visual identity,
yeah.
it makes it so much easier for people to remember your brand.
Right. Right.
So when they see your logo,
okay.
it's always the same colors, the same fonts.
Right.
They start to build this strong association in their minds.
Right. Yeah.
Between those visuals and your company.
Right. So it's not just like, oh, that's a pretty logo. It's, oh, I know who that is.
Exactly. It's that immediate recognition.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this has to go beyond just your logo, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you've got to be consistent.
Consistency is key.
Yeah.
This is where cross-channel implementation comes in.
Okay.
Think about all the different ways people might interact with your brand.
Okay.
Social media, podcasts,
right.
website, even physical packaging.
Yeah.
If your colors, your message, your brand personality,
right.
if all of that is consistent across all those different touch points,
right.
it reinforces that sense of familiarity.
It's got to all feel like it's coming from the same place.
Exactly. Unified, consistent, familiar.
So, like, if your social media is all fun and playful, but then your website is really serious and corporate,
that disconnect, that's a problem.
It's not going to work, yeah. So you've got to think about your emails, your newsletters,
for everything.
Your product packaging. Like, it's got to all be a cohesive thing.
It's all part of the brand story.
Right, right, right. And I guess, you have to track this too, right?
Absolutely. You have to measure, track your results.
Okay.
See what's working, see what's not.
See what's resonating.
Exactly. And then refine your strategy based on that data.
Okay, so let's talk about digital stuff specifically.
Okay, let's dive into the digital world.
So how do you, use the mere exposure effect on social media?
All right, so social media it's all about consistency.
Okay.
Having a regular content calendar.
Right.
Similar image styles.
Yeah.
Repeating hashtags.
Yeah.
These can all help keep you in front of your audience.
Right. So, if you're always posting about, I don't know, travel tips, and you use the same hashtag every time,
people start to associate you with that hashtag.
Right.
With that topic.
Right. So when they see that hashtag, they think of you.
Exactly.
Like, oh, yeah, that's the travel tips person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the key on social media is balancing that consistency with fresh content.
Okay.
You don't want to just keep posting the same thing over and over again.
Right, right. People get bored.
People will get bored.
Right.
So you have to experiment with different formats.
Okay.
Images, videos, stories.
Right.
Keep it interesting.
Right.
But maintain that underlying visual consistency.
Yeah, right. So what about digital ads?
Yeah, digital advertising, great way to use the mere exposure effect.
Okay.
Especially retargeting. Retargeting is fantastic because it lets you re-engage people who have already shown some interest.
Right. So they've been on your site.
Yeah, they visited your site. Maybe they put something in their cart.
Right.
But they didn't buy.
Yeah.
Retargeting, you can bring them back.
Right. Hey, remember us?
Exactly. Come back. We've got what you need.
That thing you wanted is still here.
And then you have programmatic advertising, which is basically broadening your reach.
Okay.
Getting your ads in front of a wider audience.
Okay.
Across a network of different websites.
So, again, frequency is important here, right?
Absolutely.
You don't want to be that annoying ad that follows people everywhere.
No one wants to be that brand.
Right.
So manage the frequency.
Okay.
Be strategic.
Yeah.
Don't overwhelm people.
Yeah. I'm seeing you everywhere. You're creeping me out.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what about your website itself?
The website, your digital home.
Right.
Crucial for brand familiarity and trust. Yep. So consistency is key here.
Okay.
Your homepage, product pages, checkout.
Yeah.
All should have that same visual branding.
Right.
It creates a cohesive experience.
Right.
Makes people feel more comfortable, more trusting.
Right. I know where I am. I know what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond the big stuff.
Okay.
Even small things.
Yeah.
Like, the navigation, the way things are laid out.
Right.
Little micro interactions.
Yeah.
those can all subtly reinforce that brand identity.
Right. So like if all your buttons are rounded rectangles and they always do the same thing when you hover over them, it just feels, I don't know, familiar and comforting.
Exactly. It feels right.
Yeah. I know what's going to happen. I'm not scared.
Exactly. Familiarity reduces anxiety.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about, we talked a lot about digital. What about traditional stuff? Does this still apply?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
This is not just a digital thing.
Oh.
Think about print ads.
Okay.
Magazines, newspapers,
Right.
strategically placed, repeated ads, consistent visuals, headlines, taglines.
Yeah.
Those can still be super effective.
Right.
Appearing regularly in those publications that your target audience reads helps keep your brand top of mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even though it's not online, it's still that repeated exposure.
Exactly. It's about being seen, being remembered.
And what about like radio and TV?
Broadcast media.
Right.
Powerful stuff.
Oh, okay.
So think about those short, catchy jingles.
Right.
Memorable catchphrases.
Yeah.
Those can really stick in people's minds.
Okay.
And on TV, you've got that visual element.
Right.
So consistently showing your logo throughout your commercials reinforces that visual recognition.
Right.
And over time, these broadcast touch points become part of people's everyday lives.
Yeah, they become familiar.
Exactly. They lead to that instant recognition.
Oh, okay. So what about like real world stuff?
Yeah, environmental and experiential branding.
Okay.
This is where you're reaching people in their everyday environments.
Okay.
So think about billboards.
Right.
Store signage.
Yeah.
Sponsoring local events.
Right.
All these things can really help ingrain your brand in people's minds.
Right. So you see a billboard on your way to work every day.
Yeah.
And even if you don't think you're paying attention,
It's sinking in.
it's sinking in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the more people see it, the more familiar it becomes, the more they trust it.
It's not a threat anymore.
Exactly. It's part of their world.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you know if any of this is working?
This is a great question.
Yeah.
Measurement.
Okay.
How do you actually measure the impact of all this?
Right.
So, the article talks about brand recognition metrics.
Right.
Things like unaided recall, which is basically, ask someone to name brands in a certain category off the top of their head.
Okay.
No prompts.
Right.
And then you have aided recall.
Yeah.
Which is you give them a list.
Okay.
See if they recognize yours.
All right. If you heard it this one.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, even something as simple as how quickly someone recognizes your logo can be a sign of how familiar they are with your brand.
Right. The faster they recognize it, the more they know it.
Exactly. It's ingrained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day.
It's all about behavior, right? Are people actually buying?
Right. Are they clicking?
Are they engaging? Are they converting?
Yeah.
So you can track things like, how many times someone interacts with your brand before they buy something.
Okay.
You might find that there's a magic number.
Right.
A sweet spot.
Yeah.
You also want to see if your brand is even entering people's consideration set. When they're thinking about buying something in your category.
Right.
Are you even on their radar?
Right.
And, this is where it's crucial to connect that exposure data to your actual sales figures.
Right. You got to see the results.
You have to see the results.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you know if it's working, right?
Exactly. Data is key.
So what about, are there more in-depth ways to measure this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, there are some more advanced methods.
Okay.
The article talks about things like neurological tracking,
right,
eye tracking studies, implicit association tests.
Okay.
These can all give you a glimpse into those subconscious responses.
Okay.
So, are people actually reacting positively to your brand on a subconscious level?
Right. Without even knowing it.
Exactly. These methods can help confirm that.
Okay, so it's getting pretty high tech with this stuff.
It is. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So let's look at some real world examples.
Okay, case studies.
Yeah. The article talks about some really big brands.
Yeah.
Like Coca-Cola, Nike.
The classics.
Apple, McDonald's.
Yeah.
What have they done?
Well, they've really mastered this consistency thing.
Okay.
Over decades.
Right.
They've consistently repeated their core elements.
Okay.
Coca-Cola's red and white.
Right.
Nike swoosh.
Right.
Apple's minimalist design.
Right.
The golden arches. I mean, these are instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
All over the world.
Right. You see it. You know what it is.
Exactly. That's the power of consistent exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about, like, the newer companies?
The digital natives.
Yeah, like Google, Facebook, Amazon.
Yeah, so even though, their platforms are constantly evolving,
Right.
they're still really good at maintaining those core branding elements.
Okay.
So think about, Google's colorful logo, Amazon's logo that's everywhere on their site,
Yeah.
Netflix's branding within their app.
Right.
They're all providing those visual cues,
No,
that sense of familiarity.
Right. And I guess it makes you feel like, okay, I know where I am. I know what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that comfort and trust.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what about small businesses? Can they do this too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Even with smaller budgets,
Right.
there are lots of tactics they can use.
Right.
Clear signage,
Yeah.
targeted digital ads,
Right.
being active on social media.
Right.